it seems more fixable. The testing thing, we obviously screwed that up royally as a country. They are trying to scale it up. A lot of effort is going into that. It's still going to take a long time, and it will hamper our efforts until we've got it in place. Meanwhile, without testing, all we can do is large-scale mitigation efforts, like getting rid of crowds, telling people not to fly, other things like that. But also people who believe they've been exposed should quarantine. Would clear federal standards on how to quarantine and under what circumstances help?
That's not the right approach anyway. Okay. You don't want infected people or suspected infected people with their families. They'll just pass it on to them. China has had enormous success in beating down its epidemic. We don't know what's going to happen when China tries to reopen its economy and let people go back to the factories and back to the subways and back to offices and restaurants and everything else. We don't know what's going to happen, and they're going to do it in a very slow, graduated way, but they have been in lockdown all this time. But we see the drone shots from these cities and we think, ooh, lockdown, it looks terrible, there's no traffic on the street. That's not the point of what they did. They had to do that in order to introduce the measures they were going to take that were actually going to fight the epidemic. And that is testing, testing, testing. You'd hear these kind of, but 75 to 80% of it was inside the family. And they knew they had to stop that if they were going to stop the disease. So people were literally quickly taken away from their families to these giant gymnasiums or stadiums where they were not concentration camps. They were beds, there, and there were nurses in protective gear to watch out for people. They even had dance classes in these things. Because when you have lots of little old ladies sort of sitting there together waiting to see if they're okay, if you get them all up dancing, one, it helps clear their lungs if they have pneumonia, and the people who can't get up may be the ones who are crashing. It's not a bad policy. We laugh at the pictures when you see people dancing in what look like moon suits, but in fact that was something medically smart that was going on. If people actually need to be hospitalized, the people who don't need to be hospitalized are the ones in the so-called 80% of mild cases. I'm sorry I ever used that expression when I wrote that first article, because mild, when you look carefully at the study, is everything from almost no symptoms to pneumonia, but doesn't need oxygen, doesn't need hospitalization.
Wow.
Now, I've had pneumonia. I've had walking pneumonia. That was not like having a mild cold. That was serious. I had it about 2 weeks different from when Hillary Clinton got it. You saw her collapse on the street. She had to be carried into her van when she collapsed. I was standing on third base playing softball with some friends and thought, I'm going to collapse here. And went to the doctor the next day. So those are the cases. They're isolated away. People actually sort of move through the system. Suspect cases, mild to moderate cases, and hospitalized, severe, and critical cases who are actually in hospitals. And the crucial thing about that system is break the chains of transmission and also do what you can to keep the hospitals from getting overwhelmed. Because when the hospitals get overwhelmed, you have to say, okay, she lives, but he dies, and he dies, or whatever. She's young and has kids, we'll save her. Grandmother, goodbye. Those are the choices they are making in Illinois.